Hi there, Laura Wilson from Gold Star Work. Today we're going to be painting a duck feather in watercolour. We're going to be doing this one here with the purples and the blues. But you can get any feather you like. The method's the same in all the feather painting. So you can see here I've done one with green and blues. And here's some more here. And I've got my feather here that I've done. So if you've got access to some feathers, then it's really worthwhile using the real thing because you can see so much more detail in there. So let's get started. So we're going to be doing this duck feather here. You can see the different colours in there, the purples and a little bit of green and the blue. This one here you can see more of the green in that one. But today we're going to do this one here. So I've got some colours here ready to go. So we've got ultramarine blue, burnt sienna, phthalo blue, purple lake, raw sienna, and I've got a little bit of phthalo green there. We're going to start off doing some washes. Just get the base colour in for the feather. I've drawn the feather in, and I'm just going to use a little round number 6 brush, put some water on it, and I'm going to mix up with my burnt sienna and my ultramarine blue. I'm going to mix up a bit of a browny grey colour, and this is going to be for this side here. So the more blue I put in this, the greyer it will go. But I wanted a slightly brown colour because the feather's slightly brown, so I'm putting more of the burnt sienna in. And I want a really watery mix here, so I'm watering it down quite a lot. And I'm going to go in and just put some water, some clear water onto my feather. And I'm going to leave the middle of that feather, I'm going to have a white highlight. I don't know whether you can see from the angle, but the feather here where the middle of the feather is got a white highlight running on it where the light's shining on it, so I want to leave that in there. So I'm going to leave that white. Then I'm just going to go through and paint over where I put the water. So you can see that's a grey-brown colour. Now I want some of that over this side as well. And I want a little bit of that at the top of this feather here too. I've got a little bit of pooling in there. So I'm just lifting that out with a dry brush. Because I've made this colour using the ultramarine blue and the burnt sienna, when I lift out the bits that have pooled, I'm getting the blue that's coming through more in those bits, and that's actually quite a nice look, so I'm quite happy for that to happen. Now I'm going to go in with my purple. I'm going to water that down quite a lot, and I'm going to do the same thing on this side with the purple along the edge here. And then I'm going to come in with my phthalo blue, because phthalo blue is quite a strong colour. I'm going to water that down a lot too. And I'm going to put that along the edge of the feather. In the middle there. When I say the edge, I mean the middle edge. And I'm going to let that go into the purple a little bit. I've left some of those white bits because I would like some ultramarine blue on its own without the burnt sienna in it, and I'm going to go in where those light bits are that I've left. Now I'm going to let that dry before I do anything else. So I'm going to go in with a smaller brush. This is a number 1 round brush. I'm going to get some of the raw sienna. I'm going to put some of this on this bit at the end here. I'm going to fade that out as it moves up. And I'm going to put some of it where the white is here, because I can see on my feather that there's some of that browny yellow colour from here that's bleeding into the white. And then I'm going to get my mixture that I made for this colour here, and I'm going to do a few more details of these little tiny fluffy feathers. It's too dark, so I'm going to water that down quite a lot more. So I'm doing these little wispy fluffy feathers. My feather's not perfect, it's been picked up off the ground and got a bit battered, so it's got a few broken bits on it and things, which makes it interesting to paint. So there's quite a few little rough edges there. Now as I move up the feather actually gets darker as it goes up. So I'm initially using this very pale colour, and then I'll go into a darker colour, using the same mix just with less water in it. So I'm looking at my feather regularly to see where the bits are and how they're shaped and what direction the little bits of the feathers go in, so I can get the shape of the feather. So I'm not just doing it straight, I'm actually doing them on a curve, and it's giving that feather a bit of shape. my feather's got a little bit of a white edge on it as well on this side. So I want to make sure I leave a little bit of space for the white. If you put some on and you think, oh, that's way too dark, just put some more water on your brush. And using the same detail motion, just spread it out a bit. So we're just slowly building up the colour and the layers. You want some of that underneath to show through because those are our light areas showing through the feather. So now I'm going to darken that colour up a bit, like I said I was going to. I put a little bit more of the burnt sienna in there too to make it a bit warmer. And I'm going to put it along this edge here. So I'm tidying up that middle bit and darkening it up. And now I've just put some water on my brush. And I'm just pulling out that edge because I don't want that edge to be really hard. So that's just plain water I've got on my brush at the moment. And then I can go back in with my colour. And again, I'm looking at my feather, and my feather's got a dark line here, but then it's got a little bit of a lighter line, and then it goes dark again. So I'm adding in the dark, and I'm leaving a little line there for the light. And because I had a little bit of water on there, that colour is smoothing out and blending in with the water a little bit, so it's not a really harsh line. And it's lighter at the bottom here, so I don't want to put too much dark in the bottom. And I'm shaping that edge there as I see it on the actual feather. So it's really helpful to have an actual feather if you can find one, because you can see so much more detail than you would looking at a photo or looking at somebody else's picture that they've done. And then you'll also get a really unique feather to you, because no one else is going to have a feather just the same as what you've got. So I'm going to let that side dry, and we're going to work on this side here. So for this side, I'm going to use a bit of this brown for the bottom and the top there, like we did initially. And it's darker along the edge of this feather than it is on the other side. So I've mixed more of the ultramarine blue into that burnt sienna and ultramarine blue mix, so it's a bit darker and bluer. And I'm going to do the same thing as I did on the other side. Just get the bead off my brush there, and I'm just going to pull out the colour a bit with the clear water, just so that the line isn't quite so hard there. Now I'm going to water this colour down. I'm going to have a bit more of the burnt sienna in there so it matches up with this colour on the other side. And I'm going to water it down quite a lot because I want it quite pale. And I'm going to do those little wispy hairs on that side. And you'll see some of the blue has bled down into here, but that's okay because it just all helps to unify the feather. And it's got a few darker bits up the top there, so I'll put a bit more paint on that bit there. And then where it blends into the purple area, it gets darker. So I'm using this slightly bluer mix in there. And I'm going to use that slightly bluer mix as well for the top here, because the top here from the angle that I'm looking at the feather looks very dark. And I'm just feathering out that edge there where it's going to blend into the white. Just so it's not a solid line. And I'm looking at the shape of the dark on the feather and just trying to get that in. Now I'm going to get some of the purple. Now I'm just going to use the purple straight at the moment, and I can darken it up later because I want to make sure that I've got a few highlights coming through after I darken it up. I don't want to make it too dark right at the beginning. It's just patiently going through and shaping it. Again, I'm not doing it straight out, I'm doing it on a curve because that's the shape that I can see happening with my feather. And because I'm using fairly thin washes, the colour underneath is able to show through. So my camera just fell over then, so I've taken the opportunity to actually dry that off as well. And now I'm going to come in with my ultramarine blue. And I'm going to work up from this way, from the middle, out to the edge a bit. Not all the way, because I want more purple on the edge. And the reason why I've dried it off is because I want to see my individual strokes. so it looks like all the details on the feather. I don't want them to blur in together now. Now I think I'm ready to darken up this purple, and the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to use the ultramarine blue that has the burnt sienna in it, and I'm going to mix that with some of my purple. So I'll zoom out here so you can see what I'm doing. So I'm using this ultramarine blue and burnt sienna, and I'm mixing it in with the purple and making the purple a lot darker. So instead of that quite pinky purple, it's a lot darker this time. Now I'll zoom back in so you can see what I'm doing while I'm painting. So I'm just going to test this colour first to see what it looks like. Being watercolour, it will lighten up a bit as it dries, which is opposite to the acrylic. The acrylic darkens up as it dries, whereas watercolour lightens up as it dries. So if you do both like I do, you've just got to remember which way it goes. So for watercolour, you can always mix your colours darker so that you can get the right shade, whereas with acrylics you need to mix your colours lighter. And it depends on the brand of paint you're using for acrylic as well, how much it'll darken up. So I'm letting some of that underneath lighter colour show through, but I am using quite a lot of the dark to darken that up. And again, it's a reasonably watery mix. It's not really strong mix. Because I just want to build up my layers slowly, because I don't want to make it too dark right off the bat. I want to build it up, and then I can see what I'm doing properly, and I know if I need to make it darker, that's fine. It's harder to make it lighter than it is to make it darker. I'm pulling some of it into the middle there, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this dark and pull some of it along the middle and out as well. Now I'm using the number 1 brush still. And if you find you can't get a fine enough line, you could try using a rigger brush or a liner brush. So we'll have a go and see how that goes, because you can often get a lot thinner lines, but it can be harder to control where those lines are going. Whereas with the brush with the shorter brush bits on it will be easier to control. But these are really good for doing really fine lines if you wanted some really fine little bits coming out, like in those fluffy bits. Now I'm going to let that side dry, and I'm going to work on this side again. So I'm going to be building up the darks on this side a little bit more. So I'm going to take my ultramarine blue and burnt sienna mix, and I'm just putting a little bit on the side here to darken up what I've already used. And I'm going to use exactly the same method as when I did it last time. I'm going to put it along the edge. Now this time I haven't done a solid line though. So I want some of that lighter colour showing through here and there. And I'm finding that this little brush here is easier to control than the liner brush. So I'm going to continue to use that. I may use the liner brush, as I said before, to do those really wispy little edges, because you can get really fine lines then. So if I want some really wispy bits that really fade out into a tiny point, then the liner brush is definitely helpful for that. But for the most part, I'm going to be using this number 1 brush. The main thing is you want to brush with a good tip on it. So if your brushes are getting a bit old or raggedy at the end, then you can't get that really nice fine line. So you want to brush with a good tip. Doesn't have to be an expensive brush, just one that makes a nice tip so you can really get good lines. Now I'm looking at my feather, and where the dips in the feather is, where it's a bit darker, I'm putting the dark bits in, and I'm leaving some of it the way it was, where it's a bit lighter. Just shaping the feather. The more you look at something, the more you see all those different things and the different colours and the light and the shade. That's why it's really helpful to actually use an actual object, because a lot of those things you will never see just looking at a picture. And as I said, it lightens up as it dries. So as it's drying, if you think, oh, that's too light, you just go over and do a little bit more. Now I'm going to let that part dry now. And this side is nearly dry. So when this side's dry, I'm going to come back and do a bit more dark on this side. So we're just building up each side as it dries, because we want it to be dry, as I said before, because we want to see those individual strokes now to get the real details in the feather. Now at the moment, this middle bit here is just plain white. There's no paint on it. So what I can do while I'm waiting for things to dry, so I can come in with a little bit of colour and do that side, and I think I'm going to put a little bit more burnt sienna into this mix that I've been using here, because I don't want it to blend completely in with that colour there. So I'm making it a little bit warmer, and I'm not going to put it all over because I want that white highlight still. But I'm just going to put it in a few little places just to give it some shape. I'm going to shape the end of it there. So it's just not completely white paper. I want it to have a bit of shape to it. I might have got a bit carried away there, so I can put a bit of water on it and mop it up with my paper towel to lighten it up. And I've just got plain water on my brush, and I'm just smoothing it out a little bit. Now, while I'm just waiting for these bits to dry properly too, I can come in now and do the edges for my white. So what I'm going to do for that is I'm going to be using that same mixture of the ultramarine blue and the burnt sienna, and I'm going to really water it down. So I've really watered it down there. And then I can come through on the edge of this little feather here. I've just wiped the paint off my brush. I didn't put it in the water or anything, I just wiped it on the paper towel. And I'm just shaping the edge so there is actually an edge to be seen, because at the moment it's just the pencil I could see on there, and when I rub all the pencil out there's not going to be any line at all. So I do want to show that there is some white there, so I'm using this very pale grey for that. And I can blend a bit out from that dark edge as well. Doesn't need a lot on the white part to show that it's white, just a little bit to shape it. So that feels pretty dry now. So I'm going to come back in with my purple again that I made. I'm going to put a bit more of the ultramarine blue and burnt sienna into it and make it even darker. And it's gone a bit brown, so I need a bit more of the ultramarine blue. I'm going to put a bit more of the purple. And so now that's a really dark purple. And I am going to water that down a bit because it is really, really dark at the moment. And then I'm going to use that, which will probably be my darkest colour. So let's have a look and see what that looks like. So I'm going to put that in my dark area first. So you can see how dark that is. And I'm going to be putting this along the edge of my feather. But not everywhere on the edge. I'll leave the odd bit showing a bit lighter to show the shape. And you can see how you can see those individual strokes because the colour underneath is all nice and dry. So I'm building up detail as well as the colour. I'm going to use some of that in this darkest area here as well. I'm just putting a little line of it on the other side of the feather because there is quite a dark line along there. Now I think I would like to have some more of the ultramarine blue with the burnt sienna that's on the more brown side of the grey rather than just the grey, but a little bit darker than what we did here because I just want to build up some of that dark, but I don't want it all to be that purple colour, so I'm just using the burnt sienna and the ultramarine on its own with a little bit more of the burnt sienna, and so it's a slightly warmer browny colour for that bit there. And I'm going to add a little bit of that into here as well. Now I haven't used any of my green because when I look at my feather I can't actually see any green in this particular feather. So I haven't used the phthalo green at all. I'm going to get some more of my ultramarine blue, and this has got a little bit of the burnt sienna in it, but it's mostly the blue. And I'm just going to put a little bit along this side here. And I'm just having a look, and I can see, I don't know if you can see that, but I can see a little bit coming around here, so I'm just putting that in where it's overlapping. So I'm really looking at the finer details on this side now. And this is where I may want to change my brush to my liner brush so that those little fine details are very, very fine. So each time I go in with a darker colour, I'm doing a little less of that colour than the one beforehand, so that the colour underneath shows through. And I'm feathering out the edges. So I don't want just a line, I want it to have that feathery feel to it. I'm going to come back in on this side, and I think I might do a little bit of the raw sienna, so the more yellow shade here, that raw sienna colour. And I'm just going to warm up this side of the feather a little bit. So I'm using a bigger brush, and I'm just brushing it on. And again, not all over. I just want a suggestion of warmth going in there. I'm going to use my number 1 little brush again, and I'm going to use some of that raw sienna in these little fine details, these little fluffy feathers, just to put in a suggestion of a few of those in there as well. As being an artist, we can play around with the colours a bit. We don't have to do them exactly as we see them. If we feel that a painting needs something, then we can just add it as we want to. So I need to let that dry before I go back and do the darkest details on there. So I'm going to come back in, and I'm using the same dark colour that I used here with the ultramarine blue and the burnt sienna, but I've made it a little bluer by putting in a bit more of the ultramarine. And I'm just going to use it quite sparingly, and I'm using my liner brush, And the same one on this side when I did the dark here. I'm just having a look and seeing where I want those really fine extra details. Where you see the little bits of the feather that are a little bit broken or bent, a little bit of extra shade. Just highlighting those dark little lines a bit more, darkening them up. And because the paint dries lighter, sometimes you have to wait for it to dry to see what it really looks like before you know whether you need to add anything else into it. And sometimes you may not see it on the feather, but when you look at your picture you think, oh, that just needs a little bit more dark, or a few more little lines to really make that stand out. And that's okay, you can do that. You don't have to be a slave to what you're trying to do unless you're trying to do it completely realistically. So I'm pretty happy with that at the moment. So we'll let that dry and then we'll see if we want to do anything else. And you'll see in these other ones that I've done, I've actually put in the shadow. So it's completely up to you whether you put a shadow in or not. So on this one I put just a very slight suggestion of a shadow. This one's got a little bit more shadow, and on this one there's a definite line of shadow along there. So you can decide whether you want to do the shadow or not. I'm having a look at mine, and the way the sun's shining at the moment, there's a definite dark shadow along here. So I can put in my little shadow along here, but I don't think I'll do it as dark as what it is with the sun shining on it at the moment. Now I want to make sure when I do my shadow that I am making sure I've still got my light edge on my feather. So I'm going to make sure that the little light edge along my feather is still showing up. So I'm just using plain water at the moment. And I'm going to use my ultramarine blue and my burnt sienna and a bit of my purple, and I'm going to make it more bluey, so I'm going to get a nice grey. So I've got a purpley grey, and I'm going to drop that colour onto my water. I'm just taking the paint off my brush, but I haven't washed it. I'm going to get my paper towel, and I'm just going to blot along the shadow. Make sure I've got the shape that I want, and I quite like these little feathery bits here, so I don't want to blot out those feathery bits, but I am blotting some of the colour off. So I want the shadow closest to the feather to be darker, and it lightens up as it comes out from the feather. And then to help that effect, I've just got clear water on my brush. And then I can come in and blot again. And I can get a bit more of the paint just to darken that up in areas. I think that's looking pretty good. So there's my finished feather. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe for more videos on how to paint with watercolour, and I also do acrylic painting videos. And you can see other examples that I've painted, so you can use different colours. These are all duck feathers because I have easy access to duck feathers where I am, but you can use any colours, any feathers. The method is still the same. You're doing your washes first and then coming in with your details and then your dark final details and your shadows. So I hope you enjoyed that video. Happy painting, everyone.